We think of law as the operating system for civilization, a logical code that keeps society from crashing. But what if that code was written by a committee of pranksters, petty tyrants, and people trying to solve a very specific problem that only happened once? Today, we're exploring 50 laws so bafflingly stupid, they prove the biggest bug in the system has always been us. These aren't just bizarre rules. They are a hilarious, crystal-clear window into the glorious chaos of the human mind. 1. Getting a fish drunk is a crime in the state of Ohio. Let's just let that sink in for a moment. This isn't a vague regulation about water pollution. It's a law that specifically targets the act of intoxicating a fish. What historical event prompted this? Was there a notorious gang of teenagers pouring cheap vodka into the local lake? We may never know, but the fish of Ohio can now swim safely, free from the threat of a crippling hangover and a series of questionable life choices. 2. Bureaucracy is a powerful force, but it reaches its peak absurdity with this British law. You are forbidden from dying in the Houses of Parliament. This isn't a polite suggestion, it's a genuine statute. The logic is even stranger than the rule. Anyone who passes away within the Palace of Westminster is technically entitled to a full state funeral. This law is basically a preemptive move to avoid the logistical and financial nightmare of a national ceremony every time a lord nods off a bit too permanently during a debate on agricultural subsidies. 3. Imagine committing a crime so strange, the police have to invent a new name for it on the spot. In 2011, a Swedish man was arrested for attempting to build a nuclear reactor in his kitchen. He had legally purchased radioactive materials online and was documenting his fission experiments on a blog. When he called Sweden's Radiation Safety Authority to ask if it was permissible to split atoms at home, they immediately sent the police. The authorities were so bewildered, they initially charged him with unlawful possession of nuclear material, a crime usually reserved for rogue states, not bored physicists in their apartments. 4. In Fairbanks, Alaska, it is a specific offense to serve an alcoholic beverage to a moose. This isn't a folksy legend, it's a city ordinance that was passed after a local moose known as Buzzwinkle became famous for getting drunk off fermented crab apples and causing chaos around town. In a separate, more destructive incident, another intoxicated moose got tangled in Christmas lights and terrorized residents. The city decided the only way to protect both the public and the moose from future drunken rampages was to make it illegal to be their bartender. 5. Some laws protect you from criminals. This one protects you from your own bad luck. In Las Vegas, Nevada, it is illegal to pawn your own dentures. The law was created to stop people with gambling problems from making a desperate, last-ditch effort to get more cash by pawning their false teeth. It is a strange, sad, and incredibly specific piece of legislation designed to save people from hitting the most literal rock bottom imaginable. 6. Welcome to Western Australia, where for decades you could have been a potato criminal. Under the Potato Marketing Corporation Act of 1946, it was illegal for anyone to sell, deliver, or even possess more than 50 kilograms, that's about 110 pounds, of potatoes. The government had a state-run potato monopoly. There were literal potato police who could stop and search your vehicle on suspicion of trafficking illegal spuds. This created a black market for potatoes, with clandestine deals going down in dark alleys for the forbidden tubers. 7. The government of Oklahoma has officially gone on record regarding the existence of Sasquatch. Not only do they acknowledge it, but a recent bill proposed establishing an official Bigfoot hunting season. The bill aimed to promote tourism by offering a $25,000 bounty for the safe, unharmed capture of the creature. That's right. They want you to hunt Bigfoot, but, gently. What do you think is harder? Proving Bigfoot exists or trying to gently capture an 800-pound mythical ape without hurting his feelings? 8. Switzerland has officially outlawed loneliness for guinea pigs. This isn't a joke, it's a national animal rights law. Because guinea pigs are highly social creatures, the Swiss government legally considers it an act of abuse to own just one, as it will suffer from isolation. But the bureaucratic solution is where it becomes truly absurd. What happens if one of your legally mandated pair dies? To prevent the surviving guinea pig from becoming an illegal singleton, there are actual services you can contact to rent a temporary companion guinea pig until you can find a new permanent one. 9. Here is a law that is a perfect time capsule of bygone weirdness. In Florida, it is illegal for an unmarried woman to go parachuting on a Sunday. Any other day of the week? Fine, married, go for it. But if you are single and it's the Lord's Day, jumping out of a plane is for some reason a crime punishable by a fine or even jail time. The origin of this law is completely lost to history, leaving us to wonder what catastrophic event involving a bachelorette party and a skydiving plane led to its creation. 10. In a stunning display of legal pedantry, the state of Ohio makes it illegal to use a fish for the purpose of dueling. This isn't part of a broader animal cruelty law. It's a specific clause within the Ohio Sportsman's Code. The law forbids taking or attempting to take fish by any method other than angling, and then provides a list of bizarrely specific illegal methods, including by firearm, by chemical, or by personal combat. This means that settling a dispute by slapping someone with a trout is, technically, a violation of state fishing regulations. 11. What is a sandwich? In Massachusetts, this isn't a philosophical question. It's a legal one that ended up in court. When a Panera Bread franchise tried to stop a Qdoba from opening in the same mall, they cited a clause in their lease forbidding other sandwich shops. The case went to a judge who had to legally rule on whether a burrito is a sandwich. After careful deliberation, the court declared that a burrito, along with tacos and quesadillas, is not a sandwich, in part because they are typically served hot and contain fillings not traditionally associated with sandwiches. It's a multi-thousand-dollar legal battle over a lunch order. 12. If you want to sell a bouquet of flowers in Louisiana, you'd better have a license. For decades, Louisiana was the only state in America that required a government-issued license to work as a florist. To get one, you had to pass a subjective, often arbitrary practical exam judged by, you guessed it, other licensed florists who had a vested interest in limiting their competition. After years of legal challenges from aspiring floral artists who were told their arrangements lacked proper focal point, the law was finally struck down. It was a perfect, thorny example of protectionism disguised as professional standards. 13. If you're planning on riding your horse into town in Florida, make sure you have some spare change. According to state law, if you tie a horse, mule, or other animal to a parking meter, you are legally required to pay the meter fee, just as if it were a car. This statute is a beautiful holdover from an era when horse-drawn carriages and automobiles shared the same streets. It ensures that no one, regardless of their mode of transportation, gets to hog a prime parking spot for free. 14. In a beautiful display of legislative overreach, the state of Oklahoma once tried to regulate the temperature of beer. A long-standing law, only repealed in 2018, mandated that any beer with an alcohol content higher than 3.2% could only be sold at room temperature. If you wanted a cold, strong beer, you couldn't buy it at a grocery or convenience store. The bizarre logic was that warm, strong beer was less appealing and would discourage impulse consumption. It was a state-mandated inconvenience designed to make a good beer just a little bit worse. 15. Thinking of starting a career in fortune-telling? Don't do it in Pennsylvania. An old but still enforced law makes it a misdemeanor to pretend, for gain or lucre, to use occult powers to tell fortunes or locate lost property. The law isn't about whether magic is real. It's a fraud statute. But it has led to some bizarre situations, including police stings where undercover officers have had their palms read, only to arrest the psychic for their uncanny and illegal predictions. 16. In most countries, construction projects are stopped by environmental reports or budget issues. In Iceland, they are stopped by elves. Belief in the Huldifolk, or hidden people, is so deeply ingrained that their supposed homes, often distinctive rocks and hills, are given informal legal protection. Major highways have been completely rerouted after public protests that the original path would destroy an elven habitat. It's a country where the official road administration has a formal process for dealing with magical folklore, putting civil engineering on a collision course with the supernatural. 17. In one of the most badass legal classifications of all time, the British government once declared an entire musical instrument to be a weapon of war. After a failed Scottish rebellion in 1746, the Act of Proscription banned kilts, tartans, and possession of the Great Highland bagpipe. Because the pipes were used to signal troops and inspire soldiers in battle, the English courts ruled that they were not a musical instrument, but an instrument of war. For a time, simply playing the bagpipes could get you executed. 18. If you want to stroll through the charming seaside town of Carmel by the Sea, California, you might need a permit for your shoes. A truly bizarre municipal code forbids wearing high heels over 2 inches in height without a permit from City Hall. This isn't a fashion police state, it's a clever legal maneuver. The law was enacted in the 1920s to protect the city from lawsuits from women who tripped on the town's famously irregular, tree-root-riddled sidewalks. If you're wearing heels without a permit and you fall, you can't sue. The permits, by the way, are free. 19. Want to open a bar in Nebraska? You'd better have a good soup recipe. A bizarre old law there makes it illegal to sell beer unless you are also brewing a kettle of soup. This wasn't about public health. It was a clever legal loophole. By having a pot of soup constantly simmering, a bar could legally classify itself as a restaurant, which had much looser rules for selling alcohol than a simple tavern did. It's a law that forced bartenders to worry about their minestrone just as much as their beer taps. 20. This next law wasn't born in a quiet legislative session. This law was written in pure, unadulterated rage. A 1924 Arizona statute makes it illegal for a donkey to sleep in a bathtub. You can just picture the scene. A flash flood hits a small town, a farmer brings his prized donkey inside for safety, and the donkey discovers the sublime comfort of a cast-iron tub. For weeks, the farmer can't bathe because the donkey refuses to move. It's the ultimate standoff, ending only when the farmer storms down to the town council and demands they make it a crime. 21. In Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, it is illegal to dance in public in a way that would annoy or obstruct other people. More specifically, the law forbids dancing at any public monument or memorial. This ordinance was put to the test in 2011 when a group of people dancing at the Jefferson Memorial were arrested. A federal judge later upheld the arrests, ruling that the interior of the memorial is a place of decorum and tranquility, not a dance floor. So, if you feel the urge to bust a move, make sure it's not in front of a giant statue of a founding father. 22. What happens when a city's love for art goes a little too far? In the town of Huesca, Spain, a bizarre ancient law is still technically on the books that requires all citizens to be decently skilled in playing the lyre. This law dates back to the Roman era when the town was a center for arts education. While you won't actually be arrested for being musically inept today, the law was never formally repealed. It remains a ghostly reminder of a time when your inability to strum a classical instrument could have made you a public nuisance. 23. The Tennessee state constitution explicitly forbids anyone from holding public office who denies the existence of God, or even just the concept of a heaven and hell. The U.S. Supreme Court made this law completely unenforceable back in 1961, but the text was never actually removed from the document. It remains on the books as a perfect legal paradox, a rule that is simultaneously the supreme law of the state and in complete violation of the supreme law of the nation. 24. Planning a trip to Venice? Be careful what you feed the pigeons. A 2008 law made it strictly illegal to feed the thousands of pigeons that flock to St. Mark's Square. This isn't a gentle suggestion. The fines can run up to €700. The city was spending a fortune cleaning up after the birds and repairing the damage their acidic droppings caused to historic marble statues and buildings. For centuries, feeding the pigeons was a beloved tourist tradition. Now, it's one of the most expensive snacks you'll ever buy. 25. Most cities would prefer you not spit on the sidewalk. Barcelona, Spain, however, treats it with the seriousness of a major crime. The city has an aggressive public ordinance that makes spitting in a public place a major offense, carrying a fine that can be significantly higher than for parking violations or minor traffic infractions. This isn't just a forgotten rule. It's actively enforced as part of a civic cleanliness campaign. It's a place where a single, stray bit of phlegm can end up costing you more than a fancy tapas dinner, turning a disgusting habit into a surprisingly expensive one. 26. In Japan, a country famous for its intense work culture, the government had to literally make it illegal for companies to force their employees to work too much. A recent work-style reform law sets a strict legal limit on overtime hours and imposes hefty fines on companies that break the rule. The law was created to combat karoshi, a Japanese term for death from overwork, which had become a national crisis. Essentially, the government had to pass a law to force its own people to go home from the office. 27. If you find yourself in the middle of the ocean, you might think you're in a lawless paradise. You would be wrong, thanks to the United Nations. According to international maritime law, if you build an artificial island in international waters, it is legally required to have a lighthouse. It doesn't matter if your island is a floating research station or a micronation built on a pile of tires. If it's man-made and stationary, it needs a light to warn other ships. It's a cosmic building code for would-be sea-steadiers. 28. Be careful what you write on your vacation postcards. According to a long-standing but still technically valid United States federal law, it is illegal to mail any postcard containing scurrilous, defamatory, or threatening language. This is a remnant of the 19th century Comstock Act, a series of moral purity laws. While it was intended to stop threats and libel, the vague term scurrilous gave postmasters incredible power. A simple, grumpy message like, "The weather is awful and the hotel manager is a thief," could theoretically have been deemed illegal to mail, making the U.S. Postal Service the official censor of your vacation complaints. 29. Thinking about reincarnation. The Chinese government would like a word. In 2007, the State Administration for Religious Affairs passed a law stating that all Buddhist monks in China who wish to reincarnate must first receive permission from the government. The law, officially known as Management Measures for the Reincarnation of Living Buddhas, is widely seen as a political tool to control the selection of the next Dalai Lama. It is, without a doubt, the most audacious attempt by a bureaucracy to regulate the afterlife. 30. In the state of Maryland, it is illegal to bring a lion to the movies. This isn't a vague animal prohibition. The law is incredibly specific. You can bring a dog, a cat, maybe even a well-behaved ferret. But the line is drawn firmly and unequivocally at lions. The law's origin is a mystery, leaving us to wonder about the single, catastrophic, bring your lion to the cinema night in Baltimore's history that made this rule a necessity. It is the perfect, baffling punctuation mark on the beautiful absurdity of lawmaking. 31. Have you ever been so profoundly annoyed by something that you wished you could make it illegal for an entire country? Well, in 1992, the government of Singapore did exactly that. They banned the sale and import of all chewing gum. The reason? Vandals kept sticking used gum on the door sensors of their brand-new mass transit subway trains, causing constant delays. So, instead of going after the vandals, they declared war on the gum itself. It's like finding a single ant in your kitchen and deciding to outlaw sugar for the entire nation. 32. Imagine a law so specific, it feels like it was written to solve a problem in a 1920s cartoon. In the city of Marion, Ohio, there is an ordinance that makes it illegal to eat a donut while walking backwards. There is no context, no explanation, just a simple, elegant, and profoundly baffling prohibition. Was there a rash of citizens moonwalking into traffic while enjoying a cruller? Was it a bizarrely specific sobriety test? The world may never know, but if you're in Marion, please, enjoy your pastries responsibly and always face forward. 33. In the United Kingdom, it is an offense to be drunk and in charge of a cow. This is not a joke. It's part of the Licensing Act of 1872. The law also includes being drunk in charge of a horse, carriage, or steam engine. It was a serious public safety measure in the Victorian era, designed to prevent intoxicated farmers from causing chaos on public roads. The law remains on the books, a fantastic piece of legal trivia that protects the citizens of Britain from the menace of an inebriated farmer and his wayward cattle. 34. In Switzerland, a country known for its precision, they have extended their legal framework to the plant kingdom. The Swiss constitution contains a principle of dignity of creation, which has been legally interpreted to mean you cannot arbitrarily harm or deeply humiliate a plant. While you can still mow your lawn or deadhead a rose, a research scientist who, for example, decapitated a field of daisies for no valid scientific reason could theoretically be breaking the law. It's a nation that has legally decided that yelling at your ficus might be a moral crime. 35. Is that old couch on your front porch a sign of relaxing, bohemian living, or a public nuisance? In Boulder, Colorado, it's a crime. The city has a strict ban on keeping indoor furniture, like upholstered couches and armchairs, in outdoor spaces visible to the public. The law was passed to clean up the look of student neighborhoods after years of college students dragging their dilapidated furniture onto lawns and porches, where it would slowly decay in the rain and snow. It is perhaps the world's most specific anti-frat house legislation. 36. In the late 19th century, if you wanted to be a firefighter in New York City, your ability to save lives was less important than your height. A specific civil service rule mandated that all firefighters had to be a minimum of 5 feet, 7 inches tall. This wasn't about being able to reach high places. It was a political weapon. The ruling political machine, Tammany Hall, used the height requirement as a tool to disqualify certain immigrant groups, particularly the Irish, who were on average shorter at the time, from accessing stable, well-paying city jobs. It was a law that weaponized a measuring tape to enforce prejudice. 37. In Wisconsin, cheese isn't just a food, it's a legal mandate. For a period of time, a state law, famously known as the apple pie law, required that all restaurants serving apple pie must also serve it with a slice of cheese. While the mandatory serving part was eventually relaxed, the spirit of the law was part of a major push by the state's powerful dairy lobby to promote Wisconsin cheese. It remains a celebrated piece of culinary legislation, a government's official stance that the only proper way to eat America's most iconic dessert is with a slab of cheddar on top. 38. Welcome to Pacific Grove, California, a town that loves butterflies so much they've made it a crime to annoy them. This is not a joke. The city, which is nicknamed Butterfly Town, USA, has a municipal ordinance that makes it a misdemeanor to molest or otherwise bother the thousands of monarch butterflies that migrate there each winter. This law is actively enforced, and the fine can be up to $1,000. It was created to protect the fragile insects from tourists, but it has created a situation where you could face a serious legal penalty for being a little too friendly with an insect. 39. For over 200 years, women in Paris were technically criminals for wearing pants. A law enacted in 1799 required women to obtain a special permit from the police if they wished to dress like a man, which included wearing trousers. The law was intended to keep women out of certain male-dominated jobs. While it was rarely enforced in the modern era, it remained stubbornly on the books. It was only officially and finally repealed in 2013, ending a 2-century-long state-sponsored fashion crime. 40. In Oklahoma, it is illegal to read a comic book while operating a motor vehicle. This isn't part of a general distracted driving law. It is a specific, standalone statute. The law was written long before smartphones, when lawmakers were apparently terrified by the idea of drivers getting so engrossed in the adventures of Superman that they would swerve into oncoming traffic. It's a beautiful time capsule, a government's official declaration that a printed cartoon is just too dangerously captivating for the open road. 41. Let's build a car legally. You need an engine, wheels, and a windshield, right? Well, in Texas, the law has a slightly different take. According to the state's transportation code, every motor vehicle must be equipped with windshield wipers. However, there is no corresponding law that requires every vehicle to actually have a windshield. This creates the perfectly legal scenario of a driver cruising in the rain, getting soaked, while a pair of wipers dutifully swishes back and forth in the empty space where the glass should be. It's a masterpiece of legislative oversight, a law that meticulously regulates the accessory but completely forgets about the main component. 42. Imagine being a gifted musician who has overcome a tremendous physical challenge, mastering your instrument against all odds, only to be told by the government that your art is legally worthless. That is the reality codified in the state laws of Iowa, which make it illegal for a one-armed piano player to charge money for a performance. This isn't a broad, vague law. It is surgically precise in its absurdity. A two-armed pianist who only plays with one hand? Perfectly legal. A one-armed guitarist? Rock on. But a one-armed pianist specifically? The state has decided that your concert, by definition, cannot be worth a single cent. The origin is lost to history, leaving it on the books as a baffling and frankly insulting monument to legislative nonsense. 43. Here is a law that feels like it was written by a villain in a children's movie. In the town of Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, it is illegal to whisper in a church. Not shouting, not singing off-key, but the simple act of whispering during a service is a violation of a town ordinance. This rule is a relic of a time when maintaining absolute pin-drop silence during worship was considered a matter of public order, turning a discreet comment to your neighbor into a finable offense. 44. What makes a food a pickle? In Connecticut, the answer is a matter of physics. According to the state's Food and Drug Administration regulations, for a cucumber to be legally sold and advertised as a pickle, it must bounce. This law originated from a 1948 case where two men were arrested for selling pickles that were unfit for human consumption. To prove his point in court, an inspector dropped one on the floor, and it splattered instead of bouncing. The bounce test has since become the official, if informal, standard for pickle legitimacy. 45. During World War II, the United States military had a problem. They needed more pilots, but many potential recruits had bad teeth. So, they created a bizarre and incredibly specific regulation. To be accepted into the Army Air Corps, a pilot was required to have, and I quote, at least 4 incisor teeth, 3 upper and 3 lower, that occluded, meaning they had to meet properly. This was so they could bite and tear open ammunition packets or survival gear in an emergency. It's a perfect example of a life-or-death decision coming down to the alignment of your front teeth. 46. Be careful what you name your business in Canada. A long-standing law in the province of Quebec, known as Bill 101, mandates that all outdoor commercial signs must be predominantly in French. If a business wants to include English or another language, the French text must be markedly predominant, which is often legally interpreted as being at least twice as large. This has led to a unique visual landscape where you'll see a huge café, followed by a tiny coffee shop underneath, all thanks to a law designed to protect cultural identity with a ruler. 47. Whatever you do, don't put an ice cream cone in your back pocket while visiting Kentucky. This sounds like the setup to a terrible joke, but its origin is a surprisingly clever anti-horse theft measure. Apparently, a common trick was to put a cone in your pocket to lure a horse away from its owner without technically touching it. The horse would just follow the sweet treat. So, unless you want to explain to a judge that you weren't trying to steal a horse, you just have a very unusual way of storing snacks. Keep your dessert in your hands. 48. Feel like doing some spring cleaning in London? You'd better check the time first. According to the Metropolitan Police Act of 1839, it is illegal to beat or shake any carpet, rug, or mat in any street after 8 o'clock in the morning. Doormats are fine, but only before 8 a.m. This law is a fantastic relic from a time before vacuum cleaners, when the only way to clean a rug was to hang it out a window and whack it, sending clouds of dust onto the pedestrians below. Though rarely enforced today, it remains on the books, a legal ghost from the Victorian era that technically makes your morning chores a potential crime against public order. 49. What is the single most important law that shapes how a city looks? For most places, it's zoning. But not in Houston, Texas. It is the largest city in the United States with absolutely no zoning laws. This isn't an oversight, it's a deliberate, long-standing policy. It means there are no legal rules separating commercial, industrial, and residential areas. This creates a landscape of beautiful absurdity. A gleaming skyscraper can be built right next to a tiny bungalow. A noisy nightclub can open up across the street from a quiet church. It's a massive, citywide legal experiment in free market urban planning, resulting in a chaotic, unpredictable, and uniquely Houstonian landscape. All right, we've covered 49 points of pure legislative chaos, and there's just one final entry left. But before we get to number 50, it's time for the final verdict. In our opinion, the award for the most mind-bendingly dumb law from today's list has to go to the Chinese government's law, requiring official permission for reincarnation. Simply because regulating something as profound as the afterlife and forcing a soul to get government permission to continue its eternal journey is a level of bureaucratic ambition that is both terrifying and hilarious. Do you agree with our verdict? Or did another law deserve this dubious honor? Let us know your pick in the comments. And now, for our final number. 50. We end with a law that is a masterpiece of self-aware absurdity. In the town of Enterprise, Alabama, there stands a monument in the center of town dedicated to a pest. Not a hero, not a founder, but an insect, the boll weevil. After the beetle destroyed the region's cotton crops in the early 1900s, farmers were forced to diversify into other crops like peanuts, which ended up making them far more prosperous. As a tribute, the town passed an ordinance protecting the monument, and by extension, legally enshrining the town's gratitude to the very bug that ruined their original way of life. It's the only law in the world that celebrates a catastrophe. So in the end, these laws aren't just historical mistakes. They're a perfect, hilarious X-ray of the human condition, proving that our logic is often just a thin veneer over beautiful absurdity. Which brings us to a much simpler question. What is the single dumbest, most pointless rule you are currently forced to follow in your daily life? Forget the government. We want to hear about the workplace and everyday rules that serve no purpose other than to waste your time. Expose the madness in the comments. And if you believe the world needs more explorations of beautiful nonsense, prove it by subscribing and turning on notifications.